Welcome to the panel called Islamophobia, A Year in Review. Unfortunately, there is much material to fill this panel. 2015 alone, we experienced the acts of Robert Daggett towards Holy Islamburg, New York, the fraud of Wayne Simmons and Fox News was exposed, the NYPD surveillance of Muslims is being prosecuted. We had the terror-related trial of Glendon Crawford right here in Albany, and the plea deal of his co-conspirator, Eric Fife. Last night, the night before last, Beirut and Paris were the targets of attacks which continue to fuel Islamophobia in this world. And we're going to talk about all of that today. I'd like to introduce my panel. To my left is attorney Tara Clark. She's admitted to practice in the New York State and the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of New York. She is legal counsel for the Muslims of America and has filed a multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit against an Islamophobic internet group that defamed the Islamburg community. She currently represents the community of Islamburg as counsel in their interested victims' position in the Robert Daggett case, which is currently pending in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Tennessee. To her left, we have Julia Reichel. She's an editor for the Watershed Post. Watershed is the news information hub for the Catskills in upstate New York. She recently covered the village of Islamburg in upstate New York after learning about Robert Daggett's plot to annihilate the residents of that village. She's provided the most comprehensive coverage I've seen to date, and her work has been cited by other news agencies throughout the country as a leader in the coverage of what happened here in Holy Islamburg. And to her left, we have Robert Gavin. He's a reporter for the Times Union in Albany, New York. He covers the state, federal, and criminal justice issues and legal affairs. He's also provided, in my opinion, award-winning coverage of the Glendon Crawford terror trial and that threat that faced this community here in Albany. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to begin with you, Ms. Clark. I wanted to ask you to talk with us a little bit about a document that was recently published and made public, the FBI bulletin that addressed the threats toward America and Americans in this country. Would you talk a little bit about that, please?
The FBI bulletin was actually released to various law enforcement agencies in May of 2015. But we didn't become aware of it until August of this year. And in the bulletin, the FBI basically points to American militia extremists as turning their target sets towards Muslims in this country and Islamic institutions. And this is based, their assessment is based on the degree of high confidence. That's the evidence that they were able to find pointed to a high degree that this is what the militia were going to do. Basically, the American extremists were going to focus on those groups that internet institutions, internet media organizations were labeling as high threat groups. And they specifically pointed towards the Muslims of America. Throughout the FBI bulletin, they mentioned the Muslims of America repeatedly as being a target of the American extremist militia.
Thank you. Would you tell us about Robert Doggett and the threat that he's facing the community of Islamberg this year?
Well, in April of this year, the Muslims of America had been informed by the FBI that they had made an arrest of an individual from Tennessee by the name of Robert Doggett. Basically, he had plotted with other individuals to travel to Holy Islamberg and burn down the buildings and to kill anyone that got in their way.
What was the community's response?
As you can imagine, the community was extremely concerned. This brought their level of awareness towards the threats surrounding the community. It definitely raised their awareness. We had to take extreme security precautions. The community was aware of what had happened as a result of the FBI informing them, but it was a very interesting situation. According to law enforcement, the investigation was currently ongoing, so they could not make an official announcement. The media was also, they were not informed of the foiled plot. So, in addition, the complaint was sealed. So the community has been informed of this horrible plot, and no one knows except for them and law enforcement.
Ms. Reichel, would you talk a little bit about what it's been like for you to cover the story of Islamberg and being from the media, what it was like, and how did you find out about that foiled plot?
Sure. So my newspaper is a community newspaper, and we are online, so anyone can read it, but our coverage area is the local, small town, rural area of the Catskills. And Islamberg is one of our local, small town, rural neighbors. And that's how I approached this story. I heard about the Doggett threat. There were national media reports that were issued that I actually took me off, right? But the way in which I heard that there was more is through the Muslims of America press releases, right? You guys actually took control of this story as soon as you possibly could, and you issued a press release, you had it on your website, and you staged a press conference, which was really the moment when I knew I was going to be able to meet you face to face and actually have conversations. I've been aware as a journalist about Islamberg, but not the Muslims of America, only about Islamberg. For 6 years, my paper has covered the Catskills since 2010. And my audience is, 60, 70,000 rural, mostly white Americans who are living in these little towns. And I've heard through repeated reader tips over the years, oh, there's this community called Islamberg in your region, you should know about it. And I did some Googling, and of course, years past, the first thing I saw was Martin Moyer's Christian Action Network. There were a bunch of jihadists hiding in the mountains. That was basically all of the information that was out there for me to see until the day that the Dagger threat became public and the Muslims of America began speaking about it. So it was a revelation to me that I was going to be able to come and meet you. And honestly, I thought of your community as a community probably under siege, right? Because my feeling was that people knew you were there, you've been there for a long time, but there was fear, and even amongst locals, sort of suspicion. Because I would frequently, as an editor, get, what's the deal with those people? Who are they? From people who are reading stuff on the internet. I never got a tip from, the mayor of Deposit, right, saying, who are these people? Because he already knew you. So your actual neighbors were never the ones talking to me. It was the people 2 towns over who didn't know you personally, but knew about you, and were able to Google you and find extremely incendiary things that weren't true. So I met you when you guys reached out to the public, and I showed up and started a personal relationship with you.
Excellent. And what did you see when you came to cover this mysterious place of Islamberg?
Right, so I came to a community this summer several times, right, that is like a bunch of other Catskills communities. In fact, the Catskills are full of places where people from other areas have come to build sort of utopian communities. And calling you a utopian community, I mean that in the best way. It's a place you've made this life the way that you think it should be lived, and you've created a safe space on land that you own and collectively work and live on together. So your community was just like a bunch of others that I've been to. I've been to ashrams in Sullivan County. I've been to interesting, the Bruderhof in Greene County. There are all sorts of religious communities in these hills. You are not unique. But what does make you unique is that you're the only one I know of that some dude from Tennessee wanted to attack. So when I showed up and I met you, I met some really awesome, wonderful people who were very welcoming and very clear and loud about what you wanted to say. And that clearness was the key to me, because before I met you, I wasn't sure that you would be wanting to talk about who you were and let a reporter in because of fear, right? Fear that you would be attacked. Very real fear. This is not unfounded fear. And I'm so grateful that you have decided to, despite the fear and the real danger, open your community up to talk to people. The more you talk, the more people will see what I see.
Thank you for your work. How's your readership response been to your coverage of Islamberg and Robert Dagger threat in particular?
My readership is made up of about 50% folks who live in the Catskills locally, and 50% people who live outside of the Catskills, second homeowners, we think of them. And those are really 2 different demographic groups, but they don't always split opinionatively along the same lines. So I did have this sort of bifurcated response to these stories. I would have this first wave of, oh my gosh, I didn't know this community was there, the fact that they're being threatened is horrible, this is outrageous. And then I had a second wave of long tail internet hits off of the same sort of groups of folks who are totally anti-Muslim and are looking to troll articles about it. I had a couple of trolls post comments, we have open comments on our articles, saying, this is totally one of the many jihadist sites across the country, see these 5 links to prove my case. And at one point on one of my stories, I closed commenting because I could tell that nobody who was saying these things was local, and therefore, frankly, from my perspective, they don't know what they're talking about.
Thank you. And Mr. Gavin, Islamberg is about 2 hours from here in Albany, but the threat that Islamberg faces is not unique to Islamberg, is it?
No, not at all.
And this year, you provided, like I said, some very excellent coverage on the case of Glenda Crawford. Can you tell us what Glenda Crawford was accused of and eventually convicted of?
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Glenda Scott Crawford was literally a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan, who joined the Ku Klux Klan for one reason and one reason alone, and that was it became apparent during his trial that his life's ambition, at least as of 2012, 2013, and according to him many years before that, was to massacre Muslims. This was his plan, and his trial revealed that this was something that he really went to great lengths to attempt to pull off. In a nutshell, he hoped to obtain a mobile, portable radiation-emitting device that he would put in a van, hide in a van, and have it emit enough radiation so that it would basically cause radiation poison to get into the atmosphere and kill everyone around it. And as chilling as that sounds, this will make it even more freaky, is that one of the targets of Glenda Scott Crawford was the very location you're all sitting in right here. He had planned and came up with this idea to put it in a van, and he wanted to attack a school, one right down the street. He also wanted to attack a mosque on Brandywine Avenue in Schenectady, this location, and one on Central Avenue in Albany. And this was all on video. He became the subject of an FBI investigation because what he did was, at the very beginning of the case, as far as, we knew it in court, and I know from following the case, he approached a synagogue and asked the synagogue for assistance in what he called was to help the quote-unquote enemies of Israel. The people in the synagogue were perplexed by his, kind of basically freaked out by him, told him, that's not something they were interested in doing, referred him to go to another synagogue, and then they told them, hey, you got to basically have a nut coming, and he offered the same, offer there of, hey, I can help you eliminate the enemies of Israel, and they called the police, contacted, they got up to state police, but the long and short of it was, they set up a sting operation, and over months and years, he absolutely reached out and tried to put this together. He was as willing and able to do it. If he could have pulled it off, he made it abundantly clear he would have pulled it off. He wanted to kill, to say thousands of people is clear. He also wanted to target the White House. He wanted to target the governor's mansion. And, the feasibility of how he could have pulled this off, we can debate, because by the time he started getting this plan around, the feds were onto him. But it was clear he wanted to pull it off, and he had a true, he blamed Muslims for, I think one of the scariest things is he said, I'm in this for my kids. So basically, that was his life's ambition, was to, basically eradicate Muslims.
Yeah. Would you tell us a little bit about the trial and the evidence that the jury had to ponder in making the conviction, because he did get convicted?
Yeah, it was a unique case in that a lot of times I've covered trials where you have witnesses and they'll say, here's what happened. You may have a police officer say, here's what happened. You may have surveillance tape. But what was interesting about this case is they were onto him for so long, they had literally filmed him, set him up. They initially started out with an informant. They met outside a Chinese restaurant in Scotia. His informant introduced him to another FBI agent who he thought was a white supremacist backer of his plan. He's trying to put something together, and at some point, it came out during the trial. You see this on video. They were in a hotel in the capital region. I think it's one near the airport, and they're showing, it's not enough for him. He wants something on a major scale. He wants to really take out lots of people, and all on his own. He then reaches out to the KKK. I guess it was a quote-unquote imperial wizard of the KKK. This guy Christopher Barker, who in and of himself is. To give you an idea of how Barker is, when I investigated Barker, there were other members of the Klan who said, in their words, they thought, these are Klans people, thought Barker gave the Klan a bad name. I don't know how that's possible, to be honest with you. But they thought Barker did this, and Barker went straight to the feds after meeting Crawford. So that tells you all you need to know about Crawford. So Crawford, at that point, he's set up as a video, and we were able to see this in court. So what was really fascinating about this case is we saw all this happening, and he's making a hard pitch to these Klansmen. He has two FBI agents posing as KKK members, and they basically were able to just keep this plot going over months and months and months, and eventually, when the time comes that, you see he needs help, he needs someone to help make an attachment for this device to work, and he runs into this guy named Eric Feit, who he knows. And Eric Feit is a guy he knows who works at GE, and what's really scary is that Feit appears to be just a regular kind of guy and whatever, and then he just goes along with it like it's, hey, do you want to go to the movies, He's like, yeah, I guess I'll join this plot to, massacre people, and joins, agrees, says I'm in for a penny, in for a pound, and he also they both are part of the plot. And essentially, at some point, we see on the video a warehouse the FBI had rented in Schaghticoke in Rensselaer County, and he was showing the machine, and they ran in, and a bunch of armed feds come in and arrest him. What's kind of odd is, we really never got a chance to officially see the weapon. The feds were very closed-mouthed about what we could see because they didn't want copycats. But it's pretty clear. What became very clear is that he really wanted to pull this off above anything else.
And if you wanted to see that video, where could we find it?
There are videos online on the Times Union website. If you were to type into Google, Glenn Scott Crawford, Times Union, and I think those videos should still be accessible through the website, through Google. I would also say stay tuned in the next few days. You may be seeing another one come in the news. You may see another video posted. That's something I know. I was able to get another copy of the video. So sometime in the next week, you should be able to see another video from that case out there, and trying to get more and more so people can see. You can see for yourself. I mean, you can just watch the video and see for yourself, and there's no question that Mr. Crawford's ambition was to just kill as many Muslims as possible. And he appeared adamantly of the belief that he really believed in this. He was is he crazy? Yeah, but he also appeared very motivated to pull it off. It wasn't like this was somebody who just had a plan and wasn't going to try. He did everything he could to try to pull it off. So it makes you wonder, at some point, would he have done something? I'm sure he would have. It was pretty obvious he would have done this.
Thank you. Speaking about that motivation, I'm going to turn it back to you, Ms. Clark. We've talked this morning about propaganda and the Hate Islam campaign that is running rampant. Would you talk a little bit about Wayne Simmons, the fraud who was exposed for what he was, who was formerly a contributor to Fox News? Would you tell us a little bit about him and his connection to Islam?
Oh yes, there's unfortunately, a connection between Wayne Simmons and Holy Islamberg. Just recently, several weeks ago, Wayne Simmons was arrested for basically committing a fraud. He claimed that he had previously been a member of the CIA. He was employed by the CIA, and he was able to get security clearance, and he put himself off as an expert, and he appeared on Fox News in particular on many occasions. In fact, on one occasion, he stated that there were 19 terrorist training camps throughout the United States. Now, what connects him to Holy Islamberg is that when Daugherty, after he was charged initially, the defense entered into a plea agreement. Well, at least they tried to enter into a plea agreement with the U.S. Attorney, and basically for one count of communicating a threat. That plea agreement was denied by the judge. However, in support of the plea agreement, the defense put together a brief, and in the brief, Daugherty's attorneys state that he based his information, his motivation for coming after the Muslims in Islamberg was that he believed that they were a threat to the United States. In their motion in support of the plea agreement, his attorney states that in particular, Daugherty received some of his information from a Fox News broadcast that aired on January 14th of this year. Now, if you find that broadcast, which is available on YouTube, you will see Wayne Simmons making a statement that there are 19 terrorist training camps in the United States. At that time, he also mentioned a very, in his words, close friend, Ryan Morrow, who is affiliated with the Clarion Project, the Clarion Fund. Anyone Googling that name will then find a large number of negative and false articles about the Muslims of America and their various locations throughout the United States. Islamberg in New York, Islamville in South Carolina. He has articles about Islamville in Tennessee, articles about the community that was previously in Texas. So you'll find that there are a lot of connections between Daugherty, where did he get the information from? And this goes back to the FBI bulletin, which stated that American militia extremists will be focusing on Muslims and religious institutions. And they will be basing their information on information available on the internet, which will point out those high threat areas. In particular, according to these people, it's, like Wayne Simmons, and he is not the only one. He's just one of a group of self-proclaimed experts who they're given a platform by particular media outfits. We all know about Fox News, but in particular, Fox News has a habit of giving a platform to people who have declared themselves experts by appearing on the news or different news programs multiple times, spreading falsehoods and propaganda.
Could you tell us a little bit about how Muslims of America has responded to the likes of the Wayne Simmons or finding out about the FBI bulletin? So how do we deal with this propaganda? What is our response?
The interesting thing is, when we became aware, when the Muslims of America became aware of the FBI bulletin, nothing in it was surprising to us. This was something that we already knew and had been saying for quite some time. Basically, it just supported our position. And this is something that, you find that, I'm not going to blame media for everything, but in some cases, certain types of information, certain types of stories are more readily available. As Julia stated, it was the Muslims of America who basically introduced the news of Robert Doggett to the world. The law enforcement never had a press conference. It wasn't until, it wasn't until Robert Doggett's plea agreement had been denied and then a grand jury indicted him on one count of solicitation that the U.S. Attorney's Office finally published a press release. So, basically, what is the response? The response is to make everyone aware. We have that task to inform the world of what the threat is. Because if you go by what it is that the media is exposing you to, your idea would be the greatest threat right now facing Americans or people around the world are quote-unquote radical Islamic terrorists.
In terms of responding to sort of the stereotypical, and I'm looking at you, Julia, instead of responding to the sort of stereotypical coverage of Muslims in the news, what has it been like for you to actually cover something from a different angle than what's actually not the mainstream news? What has that been like for you from a professional point of view?
We'll see. Okay. It's sort of shocking to me that, like, the view would be that the mainstream news just doesn't see Muslims as people, which is that's the underlying assumption underlying that question. And I know that's what it feels like, that the mainstream media just don't see you as people. Again, the community journalism thing helps here. You're my neighbors. I gotta see you as people. So I don't see my view as an alternative view. I see it as a local view and as something that in a small rural area you have to tolerate a wide range of beliefs and from all sorts of walks of life. I mean, I mentioned before, I've met more of a diverse range of people in my line of work up here than I did as a reporter at an alternative news weekly in Florida, as a legal reporter in Boston. This is where the rainbow of experience is. So it has not been at all shocking to meet you guys. You are not exploding my ideas of what people are like or what Muslims are like. What is really interesting, though, about Islamberg and the Muslims of America is your sort of unique multi-generational urban-rural history and your Sufi, like, particular beliefs. And you're a very fascinating piece of American history. And that has been the thing that is really exciting me. I've said many times, you guys are a book, you guys are a documentary. I mean, it's because this community, which is growing and is full of ordinary Americans with doctors and lawyers and all sorts of things, nobody really knows about you. And that is our fault for not seeing it, because you're right there. So the mainstream should see it, and here my buddy mainstream media is sitting right next to me. And he's here too, and he sees it. So Fox News is not the mainstream. I mean, it's just not.
Please do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. One of the things I think a lot of people might be surprised to know, people who view things based on stereotypes and whatnot, will think something, and then there's what people think, and then there's reality. And as I think everyone knows, those are usually two very different things. Perception is one thing, and reality is another. In the time just in Albany that I've been writing about, covering federal courts, have written about a lot of terrorist-related things, and the vast majority of them are things that, we'll call them terrorism because they are, but they're not. I've yet to write about one involving Islam myself. I mean, when I first came in there, everyone's familiar with the Araf Hussein case in this area. That's a little bit before my time as a reporter. And obviously that was a very controversial case. But I wrote about cases involving real plots, involving a man from Ruby, Ulster County, next to Kingston, who put mercury at Albany Medical Center because he didn't like his bill. And this was someone who, when he was asked to pay a tax bill earlier in his life, wrote a swastika on it. So he had a swastika in his house. So he was a white supremacist, domestic terrorist who actually committed terrorism. He poisoned, areas of Albany Medical Center. I covered a case involving a guy by the name of Unger, who was a member of people who are part of the federal government considers him part of the domestic terrorist organization. These are the sovereign citizens, and he was someone who had been linked to weapons and whatnot. I don't know how many people really know about that case, but that certainly was a domestic terrorism-related type case, and he was someone who, if you thought any of the case, was pretty alarming. And then there's this case involving Glenn Scott Crawford and Eric Fight. So I've covered 3 cases just in recent years involving white males, involving domestic terrorism, and there's a lot of that out there, and a lot of people may assume, well, hey, I didn't hear about something, so it must be all these people are not. I think you got to go back to 1995 too. Remember when the Oklahoma City bombing happened, there was a lot of people who assumed, hey, this has got to be Muslims, this has got to be, you saw who it was. I mean, it's funny when you're talking about, people saying there's camps and whatnot. I mean, the reality is the one thing we do know is there have been militia-type camps in the United States. I mean, it's something whereas, reality is very different than what people might always think. And I think it's even scarier to think that someone could be given a position to present themselves as an expert on something based on just, it seems to be someone who's just really trying to reinforce stereotypes without any sound basis or anything. And it's a shame that, any allegedly legitimate media would give them a chance to actually do that.
Rob just made me remember something on that topic that's really specific. 2 years ago, there was a young man, 20-year-old, in Trout Creek, or in very close to Deposit, very close to Islamophobia, who was found to have been stockpiling plastic explosives. Right? I got a press release from the Delaware County Sheriff saying, stockpile of explosive, potential terrorist thing happening in Trout Creek. I published the press release. It's a white kid. It's a kid who had found some abandoned munitions factory and had stolen a bunch of plastic explosives. So I published a story. This is bad. This is potential terrorism. And I get a bunch of comments on the story going, oh, it must be Holy Islamophobia because it's in Trout Creek and there's plastic explosives. People didn't even read the story or look at the mug shot. It was illustrated. They assumed, despite the obvious, contrary information, that this was related to you because of the rumors, right? So that is one thing I suggest that you point out more, is that actually there have been real terrorist plots in your town that you didn't have anything to do with, right? That maybe everybody should actually be worrying about something real.
Your turn to talk. I would just add too that, if you ever look at the bottom of most news stories, I'm not even talking about ones about terrorism, just in general. It just seems, for whatever reason, comments at the bottom of crime stories in particular, it brings out a certain segment of like hardcore racists that just seem to, you know, because it's kind of you know, we don't allow them on our blogs as we do a good job of trying to keep those type of comments out. And in many cases, you know, people will say, well, you know, hey, we have a right to. Well, no, you really don't have a right to, you know, drop a bunch of racist comments on the story, which has nothing to do with the topic we're talking about. Particularly anything involving the president, anything involving, you know, crime. It's just, it's always just alarming to me, just some of the comments that come in. It makes you wonder, who are these people? Where are they coming from? And it's scary to think that, you know, that there's a lot, you know, more of that out there. But it's something I think I could mention.
Actually, the young man who was arrested for stockpiling the weapons, that occurred earlier this year. That was this year in March, and he was stockpiling the weapons several miles from Islamabad. So whereas in the comments, because we also saw those comments, people were mentioning Islamabad as the perpetrators, the people who were actually stockpiling. The residents of Islamabad had their own concerns. We have our own concerns when we see stories like this. And, you know, you have people who are automatically jumping to conclusions and pointing the finger at Islamabad and the Muslims of America. But, as I stated, we have our own security concerns. And you don't really see, you know, a lot of stories about the good that takes place in Holy Islamabad and, you know, the different TMOA communities throughout the United States. And I mean, even this year, we had someone who, an unlicensed, at that time, an unlicensed pilot, his license had expired or had been revoked, who actually crashed right, I mean, the plane was flying extremely low. Some of the residents saw it and were very concerned, and then it crashed up the road from Islamabad. And our doctors went to assist the pilot, who miraculously was safe. He actually survived the crash. So the residents of Islamabad, Islamville, in Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, they are all citizens of the United States. They contribute. They're law-abiding. And it is just very disturbing to have to constantly face so much negativity, so many false stories and outright lies. And it's not something that we take lightly. I think you had asked earlier, you know, what is the response when you hear these things? The Muslims of America, they've never just sat down quietly as these things have been said. They actually publish a newspaper, and they have done much to try to mitigate the negativity that is out there. And they mitigate it by telling the truth. You may have heard that the communities are closed communities. They're compounds. They don't let anyone in. That's not true. Throughout the years, the media has been welcome, but unlike Julia and the Watershed, they come in and they see one thing, and then they report another thing. They do not report the truth, which is why the Watershed is so appreciated. Where the community did not feed anything to them. They came in, they observed, and they told exactly what it is that they saw. And this is an American community trying to live their lives peacefully, trying to contribute to the fabric of the country. And that's it.
Thank you. And that is going to conclude this first panel discussion. I want to thank my panelists, Rob, Julia, Tahir, for this great conversation. I didn't even have to do much work. I hope you all learned a lot because they gave a lot of information. And now when you do your internet searches, you know what to look for, what to weed out, what to question. We're going to continue to expose it in 2016. Thank you. One other housekeeping note. The watershed has given us permission to show an 8-minute clip. So this is the start of the documentary. So how would you describe that?
So when we visited Islamophobia this summer, we came back several times and we got to come to Eid, which was wonderful, thank you. And my videographer, Jess Vecchione, put together this, Jess would love to do a full-length documentary on you. Yes, yes, yes. She doesn't have the money to do it, but she might find it someday. So you could think of it as that. But this was our attempt to literally, I thought it was very important to just show as much as we could from our conversations with you so that we can take them and show them to our audience. We haven't published it yet, so you actually are getting a sneak preview. I've been holding it back until the next big Dogger case development when I know I'm going to have to write a big thing, and I want this to be ready for that. So, thank you.
So I think we're gonna cue it now. And we're gonna ease out and make Asr Salat and then come back. Right? You want to show it now or you show it after Salat? Now? Let's do it.
We have to tell our story, because we're the ones that are affected, our lives are affected, our children, the family, our community, the American Taliban. It's a terminology that we have given to these attackers, to these militia. God had a plan to come in, and if needed, to wipe out our community.
This is the entrance to Islamophobia, a hamlet in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York that is home to about 25 mostly African-American Muslim families that has been located here for about 30 years. Islamophobia has made headlines across the United States recently for being the target of a plot to attack its mosque and to potentially murder its civilians.
Islamophobia has been here for well over 30 years. Most of the families migrated from New York City, Philadelphia, major cities throughout the United States, looking for a better life. Lifestyle that they can raise their children in safety, without crime, without violence.
We're peaceful people, you know, and we just see ourselves as being Americans that want to just make a better way for our families and our children. The thought that anyone would ever threaten their existence just because of our faith or our skin color is really kind of disturbing.
We are keeping track of everything that takes place, watching the situation very closely, and also advocating for ourselves as victims to make sure that our rights are acknowledged and recognized. We've noticed from the beginning the extreme double standard in reference to how this case is progressing, beginning from the media, the lack of coverage. We believe that his actions satisfy the elements of domestic terrorism. We believe that he should be charged with a hate crime. We really are perplexed and do not understand why those charges have not been assigned in this case.
It started with Martin Moore, Christian Action Network. They provoked and pushed people to respond, pushed the militia, even incited others to respond and take action.
The media come up and they'll actually go and speak to the local law enforcement, and they'll go and speak to the FBI, and they'll ask, well, is this true? Are these things true? I've heard this has occurred. That never happened with them. And he's even went so far as to post our address on the internet, on his website, and says, hey, you gotta go check these guys out.
We have a very, good relationship with law enforcement, and that's, carrying on 15, 20 years now. They visit our community regularly, in regular contact, and they're aware of what is going on in Islamophobia and all of our locations throughout the United States, North America, and the world.
The community of Islamophobia has been there for a number of years, decades actually, probably 30 years the community has been there. We've had numerous interactions with the people of Islamophobia and never experienced any trouble. I think most people in the community, because it's been there so long, they've looked at the folks there as part of the community, the whole jobs in the community, because it tends to be in the local school district. So I think there may be pockets of misinformation or pockets of people that may have some concerns yet, but I don't think, for the most part, it represents the majority of the community.
Today we're celebrating the end of the holy month of Ramadan. It's our Eid al-Fitr celebration, and we fasted for 30 days. So today, the most exciting thing is to have the big feast, lots of food, lots of dessert, lots of games, even drink. Kids just have a really good time. Everyone dresses up, and we're just being thankful for all the things that we were giving thanks for during the month of Ramadan. When we have our Eid al-Fitr celebration, it's just a celebration and commemoration of that whole entire month.
I was raised here. I mean, this was my whole life, pretty much. Running up and down these roads, climbing trees, falling to trees. We watched movies, but it wasn't our life. It's not like the way life is now, movies, video games. We picked the berries, the elderberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries. We saw the bear, we ran. It's the best kind. It's like movie talent.
From Brooklyn with my family. If you can experience culture shock within your own country, I definitely did. Moving from a place where, we didn't have that many, parks nearby and, a city life to the country. We spent our days exploring, trying to fish in a pond, collecting salamanders. We had chickens and goats. We gardened for the first time. It was a lovely, peaceful existence.
The majority of our community members are not just Muslim, but American Muslim. We're born here, within the United States. So it's not that community members have migrated from other countries, but this is actually the country of their forefathers, the country where, from the very beginning, they worked very hard to develop and to establish.
Myself and my siblings, we would imagine how it would be with more people here. Maybe one day we'll have a store and we'll have a masjid and, we'll have a place where the girls can go and play basketball. And, it was something that was just a product of our imaginations, and now we see it. We see it right here in front of us. We love living here. We do not want to live in fear. We do not want to live, and we have not lived in a community where we're nervous to go out amongst the community or afraid that something will happen. But we do wish that people would come forth and learn more and think more seriously about what's being said. We have worked very diligently to mitigate the damage that is caused, yet these people have been persistent in producing untruths, and we have said for many years that this is a very dangerous thing and that it puts people's lives at risk. And what do we see? This man in Tennessee, who knows nothing about us, plotted such a heinous crime against innocent American citizens. We had a feeling that these things would lead to something like this, but we just never imagined that it would actually take place.
Assalamu alaikum. Again, please return at 3:30 p.m. to hear from two more panel groups. Thank you.